Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, counter-spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into a time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
We head back 75 years to January 15th, 1948. Staats Cotsworth as Casey, crime photographer, and an episode entitled The Miracle. And we thank you for joining us on this Sunday, 15th day of January. We have 350 days remaining until we get to 2024. New Connecticut declared its independence on this date in 1777. It's known today as Vermont. The University of Notre Dame received its charter from the state of Indiana in 1844. Yeah, Notre Dame, whatever you want to call it. In 1870, a political cartoon symbolized the Democrat Party with a donkey. In 1870, a live jackass kicking a dead lion by Thomas Nast for Harper's Weekly. The Coca-Cola Company, then known as the Pemberton Medicine Company, incorporated in Atlanta in 1889. James Naismith publishing the rules for basketball on the state in 1892. And in 1936, the first building to completely covered in glass completed in Toledo in 1936. Ironically, the building was for the Owens, Illinois Glass Company, which is the sponsor of this episode of Casey, Crime Photographer. Let's see. In 1943, Japanese driven off Guadalcanal. Also in 1943, the world's largest office building dedicated in Arlington, Virginia, the Pentagon. The brutalized corpse of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, found on this date in 1947 in Leimert Park, Los Angeles. In 1967, the first Super Bowl played in Los Angeles, California. 1969, the Soviet Union launched Soyuz 5. In 1970, Muammar Gaddafi proclaimed premier of Libya. In 1973, citing progress in peace negotiations, President Nixon announced the suspension of offensive action in North Vietnam.
Because of the progress made in the negotiations between Dr. Kissinger and Special Advisor Lee Dak-to, President Nixon has directed that the bombing, shelling, and any further mining of North Vietnam be suspended. This order went into effect at 10 a.m. today, January the 15th, Washington time.
That was back in 1973. In 1976, Gerald Ford's would-be assassin, Sarah Jane Moore, sentenced to life in prison on this date in 1976. She was released from prison on December 31st, 2007, after serving 32 years. She was, Moore and Lynette Squeaky Fromm, the only two women to have attempted to assassinate an American president, both of their attempts on Gerald Ford. Both took place in California within 3 weeks of one another. Jimmy Snyder, Jimmy the Greek, ended his career as a sports commentator by making what was viewed as a racist statement to WRC TV reporter Ed Hoteling.
The black is a better athlete to begin with because he's been bred to be that way, because of his high thighs and big thighs that goes up into his back, and they can jump higher and run faster because of their bigger thighs, you see. The white man has to overcome that, but they don't try hard enough to overcome it.
CBS fired Jimmy the Greek one day after making that statement. He died 8 years later, in April of 1996, in Las Vegas. The UN deadline for the withdrawal of Iraqi forces from occupied Kuwait expired on this date in 1999, preparing the 1991, preparing the way for the start of Operation Desert Storm. The NASA Spirit rover rolled over the surface of Mars on this date in 2004. And in 2009, U.S. Airways Captain Chelsea Sullenberg, Sully, guided a jetliner disabled by a bird strike just after takeoff from New York's LaGuardia Airport to a safe landing in the Hudson River. All 155 people aboard survived. Now, passing away on this date in history, actor, singer-dancer Ray Bolger, songwriter Sammy Kahn, musician Harry Nilsson, everybody's talking at me. Billiards player Minnesota Fats, portrayed on the big screen by Jackie Gleason. Musician-composer Les Baxter, The Poor People of Paris. Pro wrestler Jimmy Superfly Snuka passing away on this date. The Cranberries' Dolores O'Riordan. Also, actress Carol Channing. And the father of The Rock, Rocky Johnson, passing away on this date back in 2020. Now, here's birthdays on this date in history, including actor Goodman Ace, also Aristotle Onassis. Goodman Ace, I can't just flush over that, because he and his wife, Jane, had some wonderful shows, and Goodman was a better writer than he was an actor. He wrote some marvelous stuff. Especially for him in the program Easy Aces. Greek shipping magnate Aristotle Onassis, drummer Gene Krupa, actor Lloyd Bridges, picked a fine time to stop smoking. Also, pro wrestler Eddie Graham, Captain Beefheart, the musician, Leonard Skinner's Ronnie Van Zant, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, I started to roll out some speeches, some excerpts of speeches from Dr. King, which are amazing and prove that while he may have been considered a liberal at the time, he would be considered a conservative today. But here's the problem. Sony Music Corporation thinks that they own all the rights to Dr. Martin Luther King's speeches, even in excerpts. And so because of that, I can't run the speeches. Just suffice it to say that he spoke well and he worked well for the African American in this country and worked well, quite frankly, for all Americans. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., born on this date in history. Lois Lane in the early Superman television shows. Phyllis Coates, 96 years old today. Child actress Margaret O'Brien, 86 today. From SCTV, the very funny Andrea Martin is 76 today. Now, Maria del Rosario Mercedes Pilar Martinez Molina Baeza, better known to most of us as Charo, well, we're still not sure about her age. She may be 72 or 76 or 82. A lot of controversy about her age. Government says she's 71. And that's not the funniest thing about her. In an interview, Charo said, "Around the world, I am known as a great musician, but in America, I'm known as the Coochie Coochie Girl. That's okay because Coochie Coochie has taken me all the way to the bank." Charo, 70-something. Let's just leave it at that. Pam on room 222, then known as Shirley Cummings, now known as Tanisha, 70 years old today. Actor Mario Van Peebles is 66. From Lisa and Cult Jam, Lisa, 56. Shane McMahon, 53 years old today. From 227 and Jerry Maguire, Regina King is 52. Rapper Pitbull is 42. And the delightful Grace VanderWaal won the 11th season of America's Got Talent, playing a mandolin. She's 19 years old today. Those some of the people who celebrate the 15th day of January as their birthday. If this is your birthday...
Hi, we're the Four Freshmen, and we just want to say, Happy birthday to you!
And from 75 years ago today, January 15th, 1948, Staats Cotsworth as Casey, crime photographer. That's up next on this Sunday Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station. Classic Radio Theater family, you know our friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of your life. He didn't stop by just creating the best pillow. He created the best bed sheets ever. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me because, you know, I'm working like 67 hours a day. Now, Mike's offering the best deal on his Giza Dreams bed sheets ever. You can get a set of Giza sheets for as low as $29.98. You'll never want to sleep on anything else once you slept on a set of Giza Dream sheets. A special offer for you right now. You can get a set of Giza sheets for as low as $29.98. Call 1-800-928-4715. Use the promo code Wyatt. Or go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Wyatt. It's good on anything on the website. That number again, 1-800-928-4715. Use my promo code Wyatt. Okay, on this Sunday Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, before we get to Casey, I want to mention that some of you would just think I'm nuts with this My Pillow stuff, but it's true. Buy my recliner. I have roll and go pillows from My Pillow. My old recliner, it's about 10 years old, and the head's kind of worn down a little bit. I put the My Pillow behind my head, and you know that if I'm not careful, I'll be asleep in a heartbeat. That My Pillow is just that comfortable. They are $12.99 if you use the promo code Wyatt when you check out. As low as $12.99. They have some that are as high as $14.98, but check it out. MyPillow.com. Click on the radio listener special. Use the promo code Wyatt. Now, Casey Crime Photographer. As I mentioned, this is sponsored by the Owens Glass Corporation out of a number of places. But Staats Cotsworth stars this episode called The Miracle from 75 years ago, January 15th, 1948.
The Anchor Hocking Glass Corporation brings you Crime Photographer.
Hiya, Tony.
Oh, okay, Ethelbert. What's doing?
Not much. We're just waiting.
Oh, waiting for what?
Waiting for you to say those wonderful words.
Oh, you mean about Anchor Hocking being the most famous name in glass? Well, not going to say 'em.
And why not?
Well, because I think the Anchor Hocking people would rather have me remind everybody that the March of Dimes begins today.
Say, that's right. And I hope that everybody wants to be in step with that famous march.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tony Marvin. Every week at this time, the Anchor Hocking Glass Corporation of Lancaster, Ohio, and its more than 10,000 employees bring you another adventure of Casey, crime photographer, ace cameraman who covers the crime news of a great city. Written by Alonzo Dean Cole, our adventure for tonight, The Miracle. Late afternoon, the richly furnished master bedroom of an imposing mansion. Beside a great canopied bed stand a handsome, dark-haired young woman and a deferential, quietly dressed young man. In the bed itself lies an older man, gray-faced and wrinkled, in whose sunken eyes lie pain and fear. In a voice that quavers with weakness, he says,
"Shouldn't that doctor be here by this time?"
It's less than half an hour since Mr. Weldon telephoned him, Father.
Less than half an hour. That means nothing to you, Marion. You have years of life ahead of you. The doctors say I have only a few months at most. Weldon, you really believe this new doctor can save me?
Dr. von Tellberg has accomplished some remarkable cures, Mr. Blaine. I have great faith in him.
I should have sent for him weeks ago instead of only today. Marion, it was your fault I didn't.
I don't share your secretary's faith in this Dr. von Tellberg, Father. As I told you before, other medical men consider him a charlatan.
Other medical men are envious of his success, Miss Blaine.
What success, Mr. Weldon? The man runs a tiny private hospital where he claims to cure diseases that reputable physicians pronounce incurable. And according to my information, he hasn't proved a single one of his claims.
Only because organized medicine refuses to accept his proofs, Miss Blaine.
Marion, I don't think you want me to get well.
Father!
Even if this von Tellberg is a quack, he's my last hope. I'm only 55 years old. A rich man. Someone's got to save me. I can't die. I can't.
That may be.
Come in.
Dr. von Tellberg is here, Miss Blaine.
Bring him in, Andrews. Bring him in.
Yes, sir. Doctor?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I am Foster Blaine, Dr. von Tellberg. This is my daughter.
How do you do?
You already know my private secretary, Homer Weldon. He tells me some wonderful things about you, Doctor.
I hope to deserve his praise, sir.
You'll wish to examine Father. I'll leave you alone.
Oh, please stay, Miss Blaine. An examination at this time is unnecessary. Mr. Weldon has provided me with your father's latest X-ray photographs, which I have carefully studied. Mr. Blaine, I can practically guarantee to restore you to health.
You practically guarantee?
Yes, but I will effect your cure only upon my own terms.
If you can save me.
anything. Then you will be removed to my private hospital this evening.
No, I won't have it.
So there can be no later question of our understanding. I have prepared this simple contract. You will please read and sign it, Mr. Blaine. Your daughter will sign, too.
I'll never sign it.
You'll do as I say.
Very well.
When this is signed, Miss Blaine, much will have been purchased.
Good morning.
Morning. I'm Casey, and this is Miss Williams. We're from the Morning Express. We have an appointment with Miss Blaine.
Oh, yes, sir. Will you please come in?
Thank you.
What?
Andrews, is that?
It's the lady and gentleman from the newspaper, Miss Blaine.
Miss Williams, I'm delighted to see you again.
Hello, Miss Blaine.
And Mr. Casey.
It's very flattering to have you remember us.
How could I ever forget you? If it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have gotten back a lot of stolen jewelry several years ago. And to show my appreciation, I determined that you'd have the first and exclusive story about Dad.
Well, we're certainly grateful.
I'll say we are, and we're tickled that you have such a story to hand out.
A miracle has happened, Mr. Casey. A perfect miracle.
Your father's completely recovered?
He's a new man. 6 months ago, well, as all of my friends know, I had no hope. I had no faith in Dr. von Telberg, and thank heaven I was wrong. Wait till you see Father.
Well, we're very happy for you, Miss Blaine.
Come into the living room and sit down. Father and Dr. von Telberg will join us. Andrews, ask them to come here, and Mr. Weldon.
Very good, Miss Blaine.
We've heard of this Dr. Hans von Telberg. He runs a little private sanitarium out on the edge of town, doesn't he?
Yes, you've probably heard, as I had, that other physicians consider him a quack.
Frankly, that's the general impression.
I believed him a charlatan at first. Oh, here's Father now. Father.
Andrews just told us your friends were here.
You remember Miss Williams and Mr. Casey?
Well, naturally. They did us a big favor once. It's nice to see both of you again.
Thanks, Mr. Blaine.
Yeah.
You look at Dad as though you'd never seen him before.
Well, it's been only 2 years since, but the change is astounding.
You look like a new man, Mr. Blaine. I've simply recovered my health. And here's the man who restored it to me. Miss Williams, Mr. Casey, Dr. von Telberg. How do you do?
Doctor.
Nice to know you. And you've met Homer Weldon, my secretary?
At the time of the robbery, 2 years ago.
Oh, yes, yeah. Glad to see you again, Weldon.
So am I.
Thank you.
Now, I know you'll want to take pictures and hear the complete story of the great thing Dr. von Telberg's done for me, so we're at your disposal.
Oh, thanks. Mr. Blaine, the last time we saw you, you were living on borrowed time. You looked it. The doctors told us what was wrong with you. But now, well, I just can't get over this.
Neither can I, Casey. I've never believed in modern miracles before.
Well, Annie, we're looking at one. I think.
I don't know what's eating you, Casey. Gee whiz, doctors are making new discoveries every day.
Doctors like this von Telberg don't make them, Ethelbert.
Oh, now, how can you say that, Casey, when we've seen the proof in Mr. Blaine's appearance?
The thing just doesn't ring true, Annie, that's all. Blaine went into that hospital on his last legs and looking at least 70 years old, and he comes out a peppy guy of about 55.
You're not playing with the idea that von Telberg has rung in an imposter for Blaine, now are you?
Oh,
You said his personal secretary and his own daughter accepted him as the real thing.
Well, the secretary was responsible for placing Blaine in von Telberg's care, Ethelbert. And Marion Blaine wouldn't be too hard to fool, because her father's cure, well, that must be a wish fulfillment for her.
What's known about this Dr. von Telberg, Miss Williams?
Well, very little. He's convinced the authorities that he's qualified to practice medicine, but most of his life has been spent in Germany.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to check on a guy like that, too. Yeah, for my dough, he's a crook. And with the publicity he'll get out of Foster Blaine's cure, he stands to make a couple of $1 million, Ethelbert. With newspaper stiffs like Miss Williams and me helping him do it.
But we've seen evidence of his cure, Casey. Well, he deserves the success we'll help bring him.
Maybe. We'll see.
Hello, Ann Williams speaking.
This is Marion Blaine.
Oh, Miss Blaine, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks.
And your father?
He's just as you saw him last, a month ago.
Oh, that's splendid.
Miss Williams, I'd like to have a talk with you and with Mr. Casey. A confidential talk.
Well, you sound upset. Is anything wrong?
No, I don't think so, but can the two of you come to the house at 8:30 this evening?
Well, yes. We'll be off duty then.
I hope to be alone at that time, except for the servants. I'll expect you.
Well, Miss Blaine, what is this all about?
I can't tell you over the phone. I mustn't talk any more now. Please come. Goodbye.
Well.
Please come in.
Thanks, Andrews.
I'll tell Miss Blaine you're here.
Oh, there she is now.
Miss Williams and Mr. Casey, I'm so glad to see you. You may go, Andrews.
Yes, Miss Blaine.
Come with me. I'm going to take you two into the conservatory. Through here, where we can be alone. Contrary to my expectations, Mr. Weldon is here tonight, and Father.
What's this all about, Miss Blaine?
Wait. Step in.
Okay.
Sit down while I close these doors.
To say that you've aroused our curiosity would be an understatement, Miss Blaine.
Yeah.
Miss Williams, Mr. Casey, I'm afraid.
Afraid of what?
Before I say what I'm compelled to say, I must be sure you will respect my confidence. I shan't be speaking for publication, at least not now.
All right, it'll be off the record.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. I know how experienced you are with the criminal side of life. I know nobody else who can advise and help me.
Go on.
Mr. Casey, it's been a month since my father came home from Dr. von Telberg's private hospital. You remember how happy I was to have him back, how convinced I was of the miracle that had apparently happened.
January 15th, 1948, Casey, crime photographer, here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. The news from 75 years ago today comes up next here on your favorite radio station. Thank you for tuning in to Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox here on your favorite station. We're listening to an episode of Casey, Crime Photographer, as it was originally broadcast on Thursday, January 15th, 1948. In the newspapers of that Thursday, 75 years ago today, these were some of the headlines. President Truman told the Republican-controlled Congress yesterday it must give him price control, rationing, and other strong anti-inflation powers or take responsibility for a possibly destructive slump. And congressional Democrats followed through by introducing legislation to provide the $40 cost of living income tax cut asked by the president for every taxpayer and dependent. The bill offered by Congressman Dingell, the Democrat of Michigan, in opposition to the $5.6 billion tax cut to which the Republican leadership of the House has promised to push through quickly. The U.S. will soon reopen Malhala, highly strategic air base near Tripoli in North Africa, from which American transport planes used as a landing field during the war. U.S. air officials in Europe said the base was being reopened, quoting, because of additional supply-carrying transport flights necessary to serve American missions in the Middle East, including the mission to Greece and the air base at Dhahran in Saudi Arabia. Secretary of Defense Forrestal said in Washington the Tripolian base was not an air base in the military sense, but a way station on a trunk line to Athens, and that the U.S. had no plans for rebuilding an air base system in Africa. The State Department warned Congress yesterday that the 16 Marshall Plan nations of Western Europe are America's bulwark against international communism and that France is the key to the whole struggle. That appraisal of Western Europe's role in the Cold War was contained in one of 17 volumes of additional data submitted to Congress by the department in a new bid for approval of the European Reconstruction Program. The department's warning was pointed up sharply by Secretary of the Army Kenneth C. Royal, who told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee earlier that the Army and its budget would have to be increased immediately and immeasurably if the aid program is rejected. Conversely, Royal said approval of the plan would go far toward reducing the need for large-scale American rearmament. Shelby County political leader E.H. Crump revealed last night he had received an anonymous letter to extort $50,000 in cash under threat of death or dynamiting his home. The 72-year-old Crump was defiant and kept his date at the appointed spot named by the extortionist, but left only a note in an empty grip. The note read, "To the coward perpetrating this dastardly thing, anyone could take a white mouse with baby teeth and run you into the Mississippi River." Crump received a similar letter May 16th of 1946. He said the handwriting looked the same. The elderly political power said his trip to the appointed spot was made against the pleadings of the FBI. And in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Judge John T. Medlin yesterday asked during the circuit court trial of an action for recovery of $1,600 in alleged gambling losses, just how is gambling accomplished with dice? John R. McDowell, a former state's attorney acting for the defense, satisfied the court's curiosity with a lecture covering the situation from snake eyes to boxcars. And those some of the day's top news stories as reported in the newspapers of Thursday, January 15th, 1948, on your radio, Casey Crime Photographer, The Miracle, the conclusion of which you hear now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox.
The miracle that had apparently happened.
Apparently?
I use that word because I've been thinking a great deal. You see, during the months Father spent under Dr. von Telberg's care, I was permitted to visit him for not more than 5 minutes each day. On most of those days, he never spoke to me because he was under the influence of drugs. And on none of those days was I able to really see him.
What do you mean by that?
His room was always kept dark.
Dark?
Well, exactly what are you driving at, Miss Blaine?
I'm beginning to wonder if the man Dr. von Telberg brought to this house is really my father.
Casey.
Shh. Someone's outside that door.
Well, this is a pleasant surprise.
Mr. Blaine.
I had no idea you had visitors, Marion. Nice to see you, Miss Williams. How are you, Casey?
Very well, thanks.
Come in, Weldon. Some old friends of ours are here.
So I see. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Weldon.
Hello. Weldon, tell Andrews to bring drinks out here for all of us.
Very well, Mr. Blaine.
I hope we're not intruding, Marion.
No, of course not. Father.
I was sure you'd make your old dad welcome. Were you in the midst of a conversation you wish to continue? If so, don't let me interrupt.
We were merely talking about the weather.
You two think Blaine was listening outside that conservatory door?
We're sure of it, Captain.
And that Secretary Weldon was listening with him, Logan.
What happened after Blaine and Weldon joined you, Casey?
They never left us until finally we had to leave them and go home.
And this happened the night before last, huh?
Tell Logan about yesterday, Annie.
Yeah, well, I phoned Miss Blaine several times, but was unable to reach her until late afternoon. And then, well, she told me everything was all right and to forget the whole thing.
Forget?
She said all her doubts about Blaine had been settled, and she was reconvinced that he was her father.
Which sounds to me as though some pressure had been brought to bear on her.
Well, it's an interesting story, but in case you've forgotten, this is the Homicide Bureau. What do you expect me to do about it?
Prevent a possible homicide by putting Marion Blaine under protection.
And investigate a possible homicide.
Whose homicide?
Well, if the present Foster Blaine is an imposter, what happened to the real one?
Look, there's no evidence whatsoever that the present Foster Blaine is an imposter. Good Lord, Casey, the guy's accepted as the real McCoy by people who've known him for years. And what's more important, banks honor the checks that guy draws as Foster Blaine.
Because of those checks, the bank honors. There's a couple of $1 million worth of reason for an imposture, Logan. Look, we know that nature never makes exact duplicates. Even twins are different. But everyone is resembled by hundreds of other people. Right. Given 6 months alone with two guys who are closely similar, a clever, unscrupulous surgeon could make one the image of the other.
Plastic surgery.
Well, of course.
And given 6 months of careful coaching by a confidential secretary, the imitator would be well able to pass as the real thing.
Yeah, you two may have something after all. I want to have a good look at Mr. Foster Blaine.
Take a keen doctor with you, Logan. If any plastic work has been done, he'll know it.
I'll take excuse me. Homicide Bureau, Captain Logan speaking. Who? Yeah, I've got it. Go on. Well, keep everyone out of the room. Don't let anyone touch anything there. We'll be with you right away. Goodbye.
Now, what was that, pal? What was that?
I was talking to Miss Marion Blaine.
Marion?
Blaine?
She's just found her father murdered.
Her father?
In the same room with his secretary, Weldon. He's an apparent suicide.
January 15th, 1948, Casey Crime Photographer on this Sunday Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. The conclusion follows these important messages. We'll start off our week Monday on Classic Radio Theater by going to Pine Ridge, Arkansas for a little bit, and then to Washington with Lum and Abner from 74 years ago, January 16th, 1949. The boys traveled to Washington, D.C. for President Truman's inauguration. That's on Monday's Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. But now the conclusion of Casey, Crime Photographer from 75 years ago today, January 15th, 1948.
Yes, Miss Blaine, tell me what happened.
When I came down to breakfast, Captain, I found Andrews, our butler, very worried. You tell him, Andrews.
Yes, Miss Blaine. I had discovered that neither Mr. Blaine or Mr. Weldon had occupied their bedrooms last night, Captain. And one of the maids reported that the door of Mr. Blaine's study was locked from the inside, and that no one answered her knock.
I told Andrews to force the lock. When he did, we saw Father and Mr. Weldon.
Allow me, Miss Blaine. Everything was exactly as you found it on your arrival, Captain.
Now, let's go back into that study, Casey, and hear what the M.E. has to say.
Yeah. You better stay here with Miss Blaine, Annie.
Yeah, okay.
What's the word, Doc?
It looks like murder and suicide, Captain. Blaine was shot twice in the chest from a distance. Weldon has a single bullet through the temple. The gun muzzle was held only a few inches away.
What time did the two guys die?
At about 2 o'clock this morning.
The rest of the house is asleep upstairs. These walls are thick. The shots wouldn't be heard.
Doc.
Yes, Casey?
Did you examine Blaine's face?
Thoroughly. No plastic surgery was performed on the man. There isn't the slightest indication of it.
Huh.
Another of your big ideas gone haywire, pal.
And how?
Now, why should Weldon kill his boss and then do a harry-carry?
Well, that's for you cops to figure out. I haven't even a haywire idea.
What have the cops figured out about that murder and suicide, Casey?
Now, that Secretary Weldon had banked a lot of dough, Ethelbert, over $100,000 during the time that Blaine was in Von Telberg's private hospital.
Apparently, Blaine got wise that Weldon had been robbing him and accused him of it. And then Weldon got desperate and shot Blaine and, well, then himself.
That's the way it looks.
You mean you don't believe it's the way it looks?
Oh, I don't know, pal. I'm trying hard not to get another big idea that'll go haywire. But Miss Williams and I got a report on the autopsy a little while ago, and, well, it just doesn't add up right.
What do you mean?
Well, the autopsy revealed that Blaine was organically sound. There wasn't even a trace of the disease that was killing him before he went to Von Telberg's.
Oh, then the guy really performed a miracle on him.
That's the way it looks.
Oh, again, huh?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Why? As newspaper stiffs, we'll report the findings. They'll be published. And poor sick souls from all over the world will flock to Von Telberg and beg him to take their dough. And I'll tell you right now, Ethelbert, when I see that happen, I'm going to quit the newspaper business.
And so am I. Come on, Casey, let's get out of here.
Well, why get out of here? You ain't sore at me, are you?
Oh, no, of course not, Ethelbert. We're simply going to cheer ourselves up by going to the undertaker's.
By going to... Huh?
Foster Blaine's body has been turned over to the embalmers. It'll be laid out in one of their rooms tonight. Well, we figured...
Marion Blaine will be there. It won't be easy for her to take. She's been nice to us, and she trusts us, so...
Maybe it'll help her if we're around, you know. Well, so long, pal.
Good night.
Night. Such places they go to. Undertakers. Ooh.
I'm very glad you came here, Anne, and you, Mr. Casey. I'm glad we're welcome, Marion.
Yes.
They made Father look very natural, didn't they? I just don't know how I could have ever doubted he was my father.
Wait a minute.
What, Casey? What?
I just noticed something that... Miss Blaine, your father was almost bald in front. He had only a thin line of hair on his forehead that he brushed back in an attempt to cover his bald spot.
Why, yes, they're brushed that way now.
Yeah, but these few brushed back hairs don't cover a bald spot.
Of course they do. Well, they don't. There's a thick stubble there.
This spot has been kept shaved.
Von Telberg found a man so like your father he could be mistaken for him, Miss Blaine, if he was as bald as your father was. Oh, no, I won't believe
The
it.
cops will when I show them this. I'm going to phone Logan right away.
Wait.
What? What's the matter?
If the man in this coffin was an imposter, Von Telberg is responsible. Von Telberg killed my real father.
I'm afraid so.
Then Dr. Von Telberg owes me a life for a life.
The cops will make him pay.
Oh, no. I'll make him pay.
What?
And you won't stop me.
You carry a gun, I see.
I've always carried it for my own protection. But now it'll be used for something else.
Oh, why point it at us?
I'm not going to let anyone interfere with what I mean to do. My car's in front of this place. Anne, you'll drive. And Mr. Casey will sit with you. If you follow directions, you'll be in no danger. Come on. We're going to call on Von Telberg. There's his house, Anne. Stop in front.
All right, Marion.
Mind if I tell you again, Marion? That you're acting very foolishly?
I tell you again, Mr. Casey, that I'm the best judge of that. Now, get out. I'll be holding this gun under my coat. Oh, I hate to threaten you two this way. You know I don't want to harm you, but I'm determined to make that man tell me what he did with my father. And then, after I've paid him, you can turn me over to the police. Ring that doorbell, Anne.
All right.
He lives alone here, so he'll answer the bell. Follow my lead, and no warnings.
You're the boss, lady.
Casey, what?
Miss Blaine
Good evening, Doctor.
and Miss Williams and Mr. Casey. This is most unexpected.
Are you alone?
Yes,
We'd like to come in.
of course.
Ladies first. Annie, Miss Blaine.
Thank you.
Habits are hard to break, aren't they, Miss Blaine? You shouldn't have acted the lady and let me get behind you.
You've got a gun, Casey.
Yes, I've got her gun. Close the door, Annie.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of this?
That's something you two murderers are going to tell us.
What, two murderers?
Yes, Anne. Marion Blaine is number one, and this guy is only a stooge.
You're mad.
Oh, no. I had time to do a whole lot of thinking during our trip out here, Miss Blaine. I have a hunch Von Telberg will straighten out everything when he realizes you came here to kill him.
That's a lie, Doctor.
Listen, Von Telberg. She knew we discovered that the dead Foster Blaine was a phony. So she brought us here at the point of a gun. Now, why do you think she did that?
But I do not know.
Well, can't you figure it? The phony Foster Blaine was apparently murdered by a guy who apparently committed suicide. If Miss Williams and I were found shot to death in your house and you were an apparent suicide,
I see.
No, Doctor. I swear.
So I, too, was to be destroyed, Miss Blaine.
Don't talk, you fool. Don't.
Yeah, I talk. To save myself. And to pay you.
Doctor!
I am no murderer. The worst I did was to put a living man in the place of a dying man no one could save. And it was your idea, Miss Blaine. You supplied the substitute in your father's twin brother.
Twin brother?
you may as well take it from there, Miss Blaine.
Yes, I may as well. Nobody but Father and I knew he had a twin because his twin ran off with my mother when I was a child. He hated me because I was the one person who knew about his disgrace and because I was like my mother. He hated me so much that in his will he left me only the legal minimum. Well, he taught me to hate, too. So when I learned the whereabouts of his twin brother...
You cooked up a big idea with the help of Weldon and Von Telberg.
Yes. Father died, and his twin brother, George, took his place. George had promised to change Father's will in my favor.
Yeah, but when he found himself in the driver's seat, he didn't do it. You had to force his hand by getting Miss Williams and me to the house, where she knew he'd be listening. And she hinted about exposing him. He made the will in your favor the next day, didn't he, Miss Blaine?
Yes.
Well, how did you make it look as though Weldon had killed him and then committed suicide?
That was very easy. Weldon was in love with me.
After you shot your father's twin, you...
I kissed Weldon as I put the gun against his head.
Oh, no.
Why not? My father gave me nothing but hatred for no fault of mine. Why should a woman return to men better than she receives?
Annie, phone for the cops.
Gee, I hope I never meet up with a gal like that Marion Blaine, Casey.
Well, it's an experience I don't want again, Ethelbert.
Well, make that a double.
How's that Dr. Von Telberg going to stand when the trial comes on?
Well, he won't go on trial as a doctor, Ethelbert. He's admitted his credentials were stolen from a real doctor who died in a German prison camp where this egg, whose real name, I think, is something like Fritz Pumpernickel, was just a hospital orderly.
Gee, the things that happen after wars.
Yeah.
Casey, the room where Blaine and Weldon were shot was locked from inside. How?
A pair of eyebrow tweezers can be used to turn the key of an old-fashioned lock through the keyhole, pal.
Oh.
Don't get any ideas.
Yeah, it's clever, that, Miss Blaine.
Yeah.
I guess there's such a thing as being too clever.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Say, this conversation is getting dull, isn't it?
Crime Photographer, starring Staats Cotsworth as Casey, is brought to you each Thursday by the Anchor Hocking Glass Corporation, makers of Fire King Oven Glass, Anchor Glass Containers, Anchor Caps and Closures, all products of Anchor Hocking, the most famous name in glass. Crime Photographer is directed by John Dietz. The original music is by Archie Blyer, and the program features Miss Jan Miner as Anne and John Gibson as Ethelbert. Herman Chittison is the Blue Note pianist. This is Tony Marvin saying goodnight for the Anchor Hocking Glass Corporation of Lancaster, Ohio, with offices in all principal cities of the United States and Canada. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
I know Jeff Stein and our listeners in Waterloo certainly enjoy Casey Crime Photographer. 75 years ago, January 15th, 1948, here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Don't forget, when you shop at MyPillow.com, use my promo code Wyatt. It'll save you up to 60%, and in some cases, maybe more. MyPillow.com, promo code Wyatt. Please thank this station and support their advertisers. Visit our webpage, classicradio.stream, and tell all your friends the great radio shows are right here at this spot on the dial. Have a great week straight ahead. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox right here on your favorite radio station.